This video is brought to you by my Patreon members. If you have a couple bucks to share and would like to help keep the lights on and the videos flowing, then head over to the link in the description for Patreon. If you don't, then fear not. I never want anybody to put themselves out to help me. I'd rather you help yourselves. But more importantly, let's head on to the story. The Flow of Humanity, written by Shadeskira. In a world where magic was the breath of life, where races wove spells as naturally as speaking, there was one race that magic had forsaken: humans. They had not weaved the notes of the elves, forged runes like the dwarves, nor challenged the spirits like the orcs. Even kobolds, small and scrappy, had prayers that called forth divine beings. But humans, they were empty. They were mundane. Also the world believed. But Alexis Whisper saw magic differently. She traveled far, studied under every race, and though she could mimic their ways, something was missing. She could hear the elves' song, but they felt hollow on her lips. She could carve dwarven ruins, but the ember of power never caught fire. Every method she tried was like forcing a square peg into a round hole. Until she asked the question no one else had: what is mana, truly? Through meditation, study, and sheer human stubbornness, she found the answer. Magic wasn't just an external force to be plucked, hammered, or dominated. It was the flow, the unseen river of power, born from the souls of all living things. And humans, so blind to external mana, had never realized they carried within them the most powerful source of all: their own souls. With this knowledge, Alexis discovered humanity's magic. Not borrowed, not begged for, but wholly theirs. A magic that required no song, no runes, no brute force, just will. With but a thought, she could command mana in its purest form, raw and untamed. When the world of magic combat games arrived, she and her 9 disciples would show the world exactly what human magic was capable of. In the Grand Colosseum, where the 10 races gathered, champions stepped forward to defend their people's supremacy. Each had spent a lifetime honing their craft. Against them stood Alexis's disciples, humans who had studied the magic of the other races, but used it in a way never before seen. Against the elves, her youngest student, her 13-year-old daughter, faced a master of spell song. The elf sang a storm of arcane notes, but the girl merely hummed softly, unraveling the magic like loose threads on a tapestry. The elven mage collapsed, exhausted. His own spells turned to whispers. Against the dwarves, her wisest disciple stepped forth, an aged scholar. The runes his opponent carved glowed with an ancient power, until he waved his hand, and the centuries of magic and the symbols withered into dust. The dwarf fell to his knees, his forged craft undone. Against the orcs, her strongest disciples stood firm as they unleashed their raw might. Yet no matter how much they struck, how fiercely they summoned spirits to lend them strength, he simply willed away the damage. The orcs, mighty and relentless, fell one by one, not to wounds, but to exhaustion. Against the goblins, her most mischievous disciple traded illusions with the trickster mage, each weaving reality like a game. But while the goblin needed chants and gestures, the human needed only to flick his fingers. Soon, the goblin's illusions faded, lost within an even grander illusion. Against the kobolds, her most serene disciple faced the high priests. They called upon divine favor, but the human did not resist. She simply became stillness itself. No prayer found purchase against her. No divine wrath struck true. When the kobold priests collapsed, they whispered in awe, calling her a walking god. Against the dryads, her most loving disciple stepped forth. The druids summoned mighty beasts, expecting a battle of nature's will. Instead, the beasts turned to the human, drawn by something deeper than druidic command. With a simple touch, she soothed them, and they refused to fight. The dryads, their own allies standing against them, conceded defeat. Against the succubi, her most charming disciple met the infamous enchantresses. They sought to enthrall him, to turn his will against himself. Yet, he simply smiled, his presence alone captivating them instead. The greatest succubus of their kind found her own heart won, lost in the effortless magic of human charm. Against the lizard folk war chief, her most relentless disciple met each attack with perfect precision, mirroring the warrior's every move and countering before they even struck. The lizard folk, masters of war, found themselves outmatched not by brute strength, but by human adaptability. Against the Goliaths, her most stubborn disciple stood firm. Totems of power burned with primal force. Yet she walked through them untouched. The mountain-born warriors roared, but their totems held nothing against her sheer, immovable will. 9 races, 9 champions, 9 defeats. Only one opponent remained, the greatest of them all, the champion of the Volpine race, a demigod warlock whose power was fueled by a being beyond mortal comprehension. He stepped into the arena, silver fur gleaming, tails curling with raw arcane force. The air trembled as his patron's presence loomed over the battlefield. But Alexis Whisper was already waiting for him. She did not raise a hand. She did not speak a word. She only breathed. With that breath, she let out a fraction of her soul's power unfold. A mere tenth of her full might spilled into the world, enough for the warlock's patron to see her. And in that moment, the ancient, godlike being faltered. A single breath from Alexis had been enough to make a patron, an entity beyond time and space, afraid. The warlock's magic faltered, his connection frayed, his tails drooped, and then he did the only thing left to do. He knelt. Silence filled the Colosseum, a silence of disbelief, of awe, of realization. The 10 races had always seen humans as magicless, powerless, but now they understood. Humanity had never been without magic. They had simply never needed to look inward before. And Alexis Whisper, the first human sorceress, had shown them all the truth. With a smile, she stepped forward and whispered to the kneeling warlock, "This is the flow, and we have only just begun." End of story. Story number 2. The Terrible Privilege, written by Jackviator. Our human was dying. Such a concept was almost unthinkable. They had been an ally of our family for many generations. To even the oldest of us, they were an abyss of time. But in truth, the sands of time had not been kind to them. I had seen the photographs on their mantle when I came to visit, or the videos they shared every now and then. We all had, stretching back through the generations. The human in their prime, climbing a mountain, kayaking down a river, smiling alongside other humans. They were beautiful, their skin smooth, their hair long, black and flowing. They stood straight and tall. Now, their back was crooked, their hair grey and thinning, wispy, like what they called cirrus clouds, impossibly far above the sky. Their skin wrinkled, rough, calloused, worn, and covered in strange specks of misplaced pigmentation. My species' bodies remained largely the same from the start of the race of life to its end. The humans once compared us to a painting. When we were born, the artist who painted us was satisfied with their work and left us alone until it was time for the painting to be sold off, never to be seen again. Humans, in contrast, were like an ever-shifting canvas, as the artist who made them was seemingly never satisfied. They tried to iron out every detail, but it was never enough. They changed and changed, first painting an infant, then a toddler, a child, a young adult, their youthful prime, their middling age, and so on and so forth. In the end, they ended up adding so many layers of paint that the whole thing could crush the easel it rested upon and collapse in itself from the sheer weight. And perhaps only then was the artist content. Our lifespan is measured in, well, the humans called it a decade or less, 10 or fewer winters, in contrast to their own lifespans, which could pass an entire century. It felt as though they had endured eons. But now, the human's grip on the mortal world was slipping ever so slowly. They are in hospice now, after collapsing in their home one day. I was lucky or unlucky enough to be staying with them at the time it had happened. I had never felt such a potent fear in my life. It felt as though my gizzard had plummeted through my body. And now I am here, by their bedside. I've seen images of my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents holding their hand as the humans sat at their own hospice bed, gently holding their talons until they slipped away into the mists of the unknown. And so it was for my great-great-great-great and my great-great-great and my great-great and my great and my grandparents and even my own parents. Every time the human made a point to memorialize them in those pictures they drew, kept in a virtual book that they had backed up to no less than 15 servers on 15 worlds. They looked through that album once a year, every year. They invited me to do so with them once. It was painful to them to flip through those old photos. That much was obvious. Yet they endured so that they would never forget their faces. And now, it is my own turn, but the roles are reversed. And I would give anything in this vast universe for the roles to be back to where they belonged. Now I am the one holding the pens and pencils, taking this last image for them. I'm not nearly as accomplished an artist, who could hope to compete with all of those decades of experience. But I do it regardless. Through the fog of tears, despite the insistence that I do not need it to if it hurts too much. I marvel at how strong they must have been to endure such a loss time and time again, to have gathered such a collection of these tragic reminders of those lost to the ages. Did it ever get easier for them? Was it as painful each time? I never know. It's impossible for me to know. But as I sit here at their bedside, powerless to do anything but sit, wait, watch, and draw with shaking claws as death slowly claims one of its most wayward souls, I find myself hoping that it did get easier for their sake, for this pain I feel is nearly unbearable. But I will bear it, in their name, as they have, time and time again. I will endure. I must. For if nothing else, honor demands it. How could I look my forefathers in the endless eyes if I did not? How can I look the human themselves in the eye when we meet again afterwards? Cherish your human. If your family is lucky enough to bear the honor of one of their kind, considering you an ally, savor every moment. Lock every second you're fortunate enough to spend with them in your memory. If you're one of my own kind, it is true, they will almost certainly outlive you. But if you are unfortunate or fortunate enough to be the one in 10 or more generations where this is not the case, and you bear the duty of watching them pass, the only thing that'll sustain you is the cherished memories you have of them. Those, and maybe one last tragic drawing to be passed down as a timeless family heirloom, to remind future generations of the joy our family once shared by having the terrible privilege of a human in our lives, to call us their friends. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.